What's going on, everyone? I am Mark. You're watching Trading with a Dummy. As I said last time in the last interview, I'm going to start dropping more interviews moving forward, not just once a month. Now I have a list of people who I want to talk to as well who've been reaching out to me. So I'm really excited to bring on a brand new guest. Some of you may not have heard of her. Her name is Suzanne. She is an author. She has a trading group. She learned options, and she has a very, very interesting story that I heard about through third party, but I want to hear it from her myself. And I think this will be a great opportunity for us to learn about her, as well as basically getting to know her story. So ladies and gentlemen, give a round of applause for Suzanne. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for coming on. So I've heard nothing but good things about you. So tell me a little bit about your background.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mark. Okay, so my background, I'm Syrian American, and I was born in the States, but my parents had actually met in Syria, and my father works in the oil industry. So for much of my childhood, I actually had the opportunity to travel the world really and live overseas. And I think that really gave me a much wider worldview about, which I think really impacts how I teach and I talk about trading, which is why I bring it up, even though, childhood it feels a bit far, back. But then as an adult, I decided that I wanted to work in the area of human rights. So I actually studied law in the UK. I studied at the University of Exeter. And since 2006, I've really been working in the area of humanitarian aid and in human rights and in the charitable sector. And so part of my journey is that I was in 2008, I actually moved to Cyprus, the Greek island, out in the Mediterranean. And I met my husband there. He was actually working for World Vision, and we met. We were actually working in the same building, and that's how we met. And my husband, my late husband, was Cameroonian, and he decided that he wanted to carry on his education. And so we ended up moving to Germany. Well, he moved to Germany, then we got married, then I moved to Germany. So I've been now in Germany for the last 10 years. And I think that again, it gives me a completely different kind of worldview or point of view when talking about trading, because so much of what we're discussing is global economics, and we're trying to trade, individual equities, but without sometimes seeing the wider picture. So I think sometimes people like that. They like having the ability to feel that they're getting a snapshot of what's happening from that kind of higher
Global aspect of things.
Yeah, and then dig down into the sector and into the equities that they are trading. And sadly, just before the coronavirus, before the pandemic, my husband was in a car accident and died in this car accident. And so, and here's my little guy.
I'm probably gonna leave this, I'm gonna probably edit some stuff in there because this part of how it is when we have kids, right? But I want to go back a little bit further before we talk about your late husband. Now, when you said you traveled a lot when you were younger, so are you an only child?
No, I do have a younger sister, but she's like 6 years younger than me.
Okay, and just growing up for the most part overseas is what places have you gone to so far or lived at?
So where I've lived, first, I was born in the States, and then we moved to the UK, and we lived in London for 2 years. Then we lived in the Emirates for 4 years in Dubai. And then we moved back to the States. And then I stayed in the States until I finished my bachelor's degree. Then I actually moved to Syria, back to see my mom's family and to live there for a year. And then I decided to carry on my studies to do my law degree, but I decided to study in the United Kingdom instead of going back to the US for a number of different reasons. And then so I studied in the south part of England, and then moved back to Syria. And then while I was there, I was actually offered a job that was based out of Cyprus. So then I moved to Cyprus, and I was based out of Cyprus for almost 3.5 years, but then the laws in Cyprus changed and my residency status was changing. And at that particular point in time, my husband was doing his master's in robotics and automation engineering here in Germany. And so we decided that instead of me moving to some third place and then when we got married, then moving to Germany, that we would just speed up the process. So we got married like sooner than we had expected. So, and then I relocated to Germany. We were in Dortmund for about 2 years. Then we actually moved to Czech Republic for a year. And we also lived in Abu Dhabi for about a year. And then when we came back to Germany to be here permanently, then we decided to move to Koblenz, which is just, it's halfway between Frankfurt and Cologne. And my husband was working for a services company as an automation and robotics engineer. And that company was actually bought up by Tesla just as like when my husband's accident happened. So at the time of my husband's accident, he was actually doing a project for Seat in Barcelona and sadly died in a car accident in Barcelona. And then that was just before the Corona situation and everybody going into lockdown. So that was in January of 2020. Then, of course, March 2020, we all went into quarantine.
Wow. Okay. So like, you sounds like you were, yes, very worldly. Is that the word? That you've been to a lot of places. Um, it's funny because I moved a lot too. I live, as you and I both know, I grew up in Germany. I was born in the States, but I grew up in Germany. But in Germany, we moved a lot. So I can
Okay.
imagine growing up in a situation like yours where you're constantly moving. It was kind of hard probably to build relationships with friends and stuff, right? So I'm assuming that you and your sister, that was it, right? It was the two of you, and you just had to try to adjust moving forward. Even though she's like 6 years younger than you, I'm sure that was kind of the relationship, right? And
Well, so my sister and I, being 6 years apart, we're actually 7 grades apart. So when I graduated from high school, my sister was just going into junior high. So the age gap was actually quite significant in that sense when we were younger. And my parents actually divorced when I was 10 and my sister was 4. So we are very close in that sense because it was, we were together a lot. But sadly, because of the age difference, I moved out when she was still quite young. So we're still close till now, but I think that had we been a bit closer in age, it would have been a bit easier to feel that, like sisterly dynamic. I think actually, if you would ask my sister, that she felt more like I was her mother than her older sister, because for a lot of her, really for her childhood, I was a really consistent presence in her life because we were always together. But because of the age difference, it was more like mother daughter than like sisters.
got you.
Mhm.
Okay. But I mean, it was definitely rough, though. I would assume moving from place to place to place to try to establish those relationship with friends, at least. I know that's how it was
Yeah.
for me, at least. But it also makes
Mhm.
me a pretty easy person to talk to when people I can fit in anywhere and everywhere. I get along with pretty much everybody. So I assume you're probably the same in the
Yeah.
same situation. Well, okay. So growing up though, was finances a huge thing in your life at all? Were your parents like big on finances? Did they talk to you about it a lot, or was it more of a situation where it wasn't spoken about?
No, so finances was definitely something that my parents took very seriously and for two totally different reasons. So both of my parents grew up in really I don't like to use the word poor, but they did grow up in very tight circumstances financially. And so my father is they both grew up with lots of brothers and sisters, and my dad grew up in a really small town in Minnesota, and then kind of got an opportunity to go to university and received a scholarship to study engineering, and so his life kind of really blossomed from there because he really has my father is very gregarious in that sense that like if an opportunity is presented to him, he'll do what it takes to kind of like do well in that opportunity. And so he really excelled into that university experience, and that basically allowed him to find financially a lot of really positive opportunities in his career as a geophysicist. And my mom also came from she was from a very big family. And they grew up in a time in Syria when things were economically very difficult. And so, her mom had to be really careful because there just was so many children. And so because of that, my mom really learned that to like take care of things and to really be exacting when it came to money. And so my parents are really, in that sense, very different. And that my father is probably like more easygoing about money in the sense because he knew that he would always be able to work and money would be there. But he did always talk about like your 10% tithe, 10% savings, live on the rest. And then as he got older, and I think he started to realize that just saving and having, somebody else invest that, and he did like all the different retirement options that were available to him and, maxed all of those out. But even as he got older, and the oil industry went through so many changes, right? So at every stage, he was really open about, what was going on because there was only three of us. So, I mean, I think it was difficult um, to hide, from your kids when you're in a, divorce situation, what's happening in your own economics. And so I think that put finances really up front because neither of my parents were living in a situation where they were like hiding what was going on. And so they were both really open, but also because they both wanted to instill in us, we got here because maybe different personalities. My dad always talked about anytime an opportunity is presented, be ready to take it, always be ready to move forward whenever a door is open, as long as it's right, not don't do things that don't make sense, but if there are opportunities in front of you, try to walk through those doors. And my mom was very much like, be organized, be strategic, think about what you're doing, like how are you going to get from point A to point B. So she was much more like looking at the pieces of the finance. My mom studied economics, or I mean accounting. I didn't say that before. So my mom very much was like always had the books in order, all the bills were paid on time, never paid an overdraft fee, never paid she was like not into paying interest on things. So she really had like finances on lockdown. Like she knew what she was doing. And my dad was a bit more easygoing, but the financial aspect for him was much more like to lean into all the opportunities that are presented to you. So
That's very interesting,
mhm.
especially seeing that they're polar opposite in a way, right? So
Yes.
that's interesting. Now, when they, because you said they divorced, right?
Mhm.
So once they separated, how did that work? Who did you mostly stay with? Was it your mom or your dad?
Mhm.
Did
So
they move
technically,
together?
my dad was our like custodial parent, but my parents literally lived like not even 30 minutes from each other. So both of them were very involved in our lives and, were really equal parties in raising us. So it was mostly just the schooling aspect that we lived with my dad. So we went to the school that was in his district. So it was more important about where he lived so that we had access to better schools. And for my mom, she was a bit more flexible to find something that was accessible to where she was working. So that was probably the only like major significance of like why my parents didn't actually end up living closer because they did get along with each other, but they were not they were not meant to be a
Yeah.
married couple.
Yeah, it happens. It happens, and especially during that time. I don't know how old you are, but you're never supposed to ask a lady how old they are. So I'm not gonna ask. But like, I'm assuming you were probably around my age, and I know back in the day, it was very much frowned upon, right, when people get divorced. So it was probably kind of hard for them to do that. My parents, for example, they were always arguing, always fighting. It was a very somewhat, their version is very different than mine. Let's just say that. But I'm an only child, right? But there was a lot of drama within my upbringing. And I just remember as a kid, I was like, I just wish they would just get divorced. That way they both be happy, but it never happened. So I'm glad it worked out for you, especially that your parents got along and it wasn't like any major issues and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I mean, I think my parents really worked at it. I credit them that they really worked on trying to have a nice dynamic. And then as we got older and we were like kind of past the whole drama of actually getting divorced and all that, then it was much more like, okay, now we're in the life that we're going to live for the foreseeable future. So we all need to kind of make the best of it. And I think my mom was also, she had a lot going on because, as a Syrian coming to America, that was a huge change. But also the fact that like once my parents were married and then I was born, we were always overseas. And then when we came back to America, then my parents divorced. And so I think my mom had a really heavy burden to lift in the sense that like now she was really for the first time in America, like living in America and, then having to find work in America. Her degree was from Syria, trying to finish her university finish her university courses so that they would be recognized in the States, and then trying to find a career that was fulfilling for her because now, she's really in a lot of ways like taking on all the burdens of, a single person that she's, having to work and care for herself, separated from my father. So I think that, she really did a phenomenal job of, also, always working, whatever opportunities were handed to her, and, really doing a great job, always trying to be like outstanding in her career. So I think that just her work ethic, I mean, I don't know if other women would have been able to do what she did. And so I think that really instilled in me this kind of, you don't unless like excuses exist, there are always times where life can become just untenable, but you really have to like dig deep and then just try to be really consistent in what you're doing and whatever you're doing at that time. For my mom, she like as she was looking for work and a new career, she always had her best foot forward and tried to do her best job. And you see it on all her job recommendations that she was just stellar and at what she was doing, and that she was really focused on being great at that. And I have to give her all the accolades because now I'm 40. I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm 40, and looking back to think, man, my mom like was really, I think at that time she was just in her early 30s and really in a new country and rebuilding her life from scratch after having built everything in Syria at that time, like her whole career, everything, expecting to marry my father and then that her life grow a life from there. But because of how much we traveled, she every time she start a new job, then we would be transitioning somewhere else. So I really have to say, like, now in my age, looking back, what my mom was able to accomplish was just, I think sometimes it gives me that fighting spirit in spite of my circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering, as a kid growing up, it sounds like you really had your head on your shoulders. Am I right? Like you didn't get in much trouble. It sounds like it.
No, not at all. I was really focused. I think that so there was a period like at the end, towards the end of my parents' divorce, that I think that my parents felt that I was struggling, and they tried to move me schools. That wasn't really a great fit, so they moved me back to the public school system. And just because the area we lived in had so many opportunities that really, even if at a private school, they weren't really able to compete with that. And so but I think there was like that kind of moment between junior high and high school where I was really trying to discover myself. And then I really just had this strong sense of conviction that, I wanted to go to law school. I wanted to become a lawyer. I really felt that that was, kind of like, stamped into my life, that that was who I was meant to be. And I think having that goal and that vision for my life really, that really allowed me to get focused because I constantly had in the back of my mind, like, you need to get good grades, you need to work hard, you need to do well, because, if I wanted to have that future of going to law school, I needed to make sure that I kind of put all the chips in my favor. So, or whatever the saying is, but cards in your favor, or cards.
No, you got it right. Don't ask me. I mess up my sayings all the time. Okay, so
So in the end, yeah, I think that having that kind of drive allowed me to really focus and then kind of drive the rest of my life behind that. So so I think that as a kid, my parents would say that there was a season where maybe they were a bit worried, but then definitely once I got to high school, they felt quite certain that I was very, headstrong in that sense.
Out of all the places that you live, would you say that England was your most favorite place to live, or was it Syria?
Okay, so my favorite place, like my dream was to live and work in the Middle East and to live in Syria. But after I got married and the war started, it became quite clear that if the war did just carried on as we now know that it did, that would become, an impossible dream. At least so till now, inflation is just so high in Syria that even though things are relatively safe in that sense, the kind of food instability and other aspects of instability are still quite high. And with COVID, it's just, yeah, that's not something that I'll probably ever be able to do. But it was something that I had hoped to live in Syria.
Wow. Okay. Because as you know, my background, I was in the military, and
Mhm.
my experience with Syria seemed to be very dangerous to live there, especially if you're not directly from their culture. Like the rules and everything is so much different over there. I'm surprised you were willing to live there. Am I maybe seeing this in like a different lens than you did?
Yeah, so really Syria was extremely safe and very diverse and very, is, big cultural experience. Now, I lived in Damascus. I wouldn't necessarily say, international people should, expats should come and like go live in some of the maybe more, um, different areas. But, you know, Aleppo and Damascus, the two largest cities, were just there. They were great. They had great education system, extremely safe. Um, I think that overall it was a really wonderful place to live. Also, you have to think like at that time before the war, it was just one of those places where, green everywhere. Even though you're in the middle of the city, it felt like there are gardens just all over the place. And just like people are so warm and friendly, very much like the I guess the Mediterranean stereotype. So and then there's also a lot of like cultural activities, so celebrating the different Christian holidays, the different Muslim holidays, and even just different, celebrating different cultures. So especially in Damascus, you have a lot of Syrians who are background either Armenian or Arab or Turkmen or, and then a diversity of religion. So I think it was like one of those places where there really was, it wasn't like a melting pot, like everybody's coming from different places and then we're all trying to become like each other, but actually that, oh, we're all here from different backgrounds and we want to celebrate each other's diversities. And I think that was something that was extremely unique about Syria and specifically about Damascus and Aleppo. And it's sad because I think I haven't actually been back since the war, but I think that has likely changed just because of the fact that demographics have just changed so significantly in that area over the last 10 years.
Yeah, so I don't want to say anything like super controversial or anything. I'll put you like in a hard position, but I would say, do you think that because of the Americans' interference or plans to go out there and start fighting, that really kind of changed the entire dynamic of Syria?
I think that the biggest problem was really that what happened with what was going on in Iraq. Basically, Iraq just created this significant instability. And there had already been a lot of demographic issues in Iraq, with the different ethnic and religious groups. It wasn't the same as Syria in the sense that, because the president's background and religious background was not represented by a majority of people, he also had to exert a lot of let's say, diplomacy between the different ethnic and religious groups inside Syria. And in Iraq, you didn't have that as much. And so once like all the power was basically this, there was like a power vacuum that created a really significant amount of political instability between really like the Iranian powers and the GCC countries. But that's kind of political, so I don't know if we should talk about that
Yeah,
on
you
here.
know,
Because
it's
if I give my honest opinion,
yeah,
that would
no,
be
no. Listen, I totally get it. It's funny
Mhm.
because me and one of my best friends, Kadar, we talk politics all the time. It's probably stuff that we can't say openly, but a lot of times we talk about all these other countries that had we not came in there and
Mhm.
supported war or invaded or try to change the regime that was in there, some of these countries would have probably been better off. And I know, like, I knew nothing about Syria until I had to go in there and we had to do missions or whatever. So I can only imagine it. Like in Iraq, I was on the ground there, so I saw firsthand the impact that we had over there,
Mhm.
positive and negative. So
Mhm.
it was one of those situations. It was just very interesting to hear that you lived in Syria so much and for a long time, because my only experience is like that place is dangerous. I would not want to take my family out there and live. Like it would be really, really scary just knowing that my family will be there and that things can happen. So that's just very interesting that was your preference of place you would love to have lived had it not been for the war and
Yeah,
stuff. Um,
very sad.
yeah. So tell me a little bit about your husband, if that's okay. If you can talk
Mhm.
about that a little
Yeah.
bit. Where did y'all meet?
Okay, so my husband was working for World Vision at the
Mhm.
time, and he was living in Cyprus, as was I, and that's how we met. We actually were going to the same church, and we happened to be working in the same building. So we started seeing each other, quite often here and there, and then that's how we met. And the nice thing was is that actually I had been independently friends with his sister and with a number of other Cameroonians that were from like the same group as him. And so slowly we ended up like our kind of worlds just kept kind of rotating around each other. And so we were really good friends for a long time. And then when he was going to, it was clear that he didn't want to carry on doing IT, that he really wanted to get deeper into engineering, and he was really gifted. So he wanted to study robotics and automation, and Germany was kind of the place for him. And so that changed the dynamics of our conversation, because now it's not like we're just like socially friends and can all go out together if he's like leaving the country. And so being that my husband was Cameroonian and I'm not Cameroonian, we weren't really sure like how that would all, if such a situation would work. So actually the year before my husband moved to Germany, my mom actually came to Cyprus and met him casually, and I actually went to Cameroon and met his parents and some of his other brothers and sisters. And then later on, when we were more serious, then my dad and his wife came over to Cyprus and met us all there, and we did like a 2-week vacation, going around and seeing all the like biblical sites and stuff. And yeah, and so then we kind of got all their buy-in. And when this residency issue came up, we kind of asked our family, like, what do you think? Do we delay? And maybe I have to move to the UK and then from the UK to Germany, and everybody was like, why are you waiting? I mean, I was already almost 30, as was my husband. He was like, you're not kids anymore. If you know that you want to get married, just start the process. And so we did.
Got you. Okay. And then from there, obviously you decided. So when you guys were working together at that one spot, what were you doing at that time?
No, so we weren't actually working together. We just happened to be in the same building.
Same building.
So
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So I've always worked in the area of human rights and humanitarian aid. So I actually work as a legal advisor to a number of different charitable organizations that focus on supporting um, ethnic and religious minorities across North Africa and the Middle East.
Got you.
So
And he was the
mhm,
IT guy in that building,
yeah,
and that's okay. That's how you guys met. Okay, I thought maybe you guys were doing similar things. All
no,
right, so
no.
when you were doing this legal job, you had graduated from college at that point?
Yeah, so that was it. So I finished law school in 2006, and my husband and I we independently, like, living in Cyprus from about 2008 to about 2011. So that
Okay.
period. He was there before me, so he was actually there for a year or two before me.
Okay. And then obviously your parents they gave you the blessing. You guys got married. And when did the kids come on the way?
Yeah, so we were actually married 5 years before we decided to have kids. I mean, we assumed that we would eventually have children, but I think that my husband wanted to be done with his master's. Well, actually, he did two masters, so he wanted to be done with that and to be, working. And then at that point, we could kind of decide, how we would move forward with, like, having children, because somebody would obviously need to take some time off. And so at that time, then when we decided to have kids, my daughter was born in 2016, and the very end, she was actually born the day before New Year's. So um, we decided to have children, and then we had my daughter, and then a few years later, then we had my son Xavier.
How was he with the whole financial literacy space at all? Was he like your dad where it was like everything, it's whatever, I'm making money and you
No,
handle
no,
the rest?
no. So in that sense, my husband, being African, was much more into tangible assets. So he was more into, like, if you were going to invest in a business, actually knowing what the business was, what it was doing, really understanding their financials. And he liked that. I mean, in his bachelor's, he actually studied business and IT in his undergrad. So he really liked how businesses actually worked kind of behind the scenes. So less of a kind of investment in, like, buying and trading stocks. And then his father actually was really into real estate. And so I think that he always came from that background. Like, really want to see, what is the physical asset that we are investing in? What is it going to do? What is, and looking more deeply there. Where I was much more into the, like, I really like being able to invest in kind of the innovative space and what is up and coming. So I was really into cryptocurrencies. Back even before 2016, I was working for a season with a telehealth company, and a lot of what we were doing was actually trying to, well, we knew that the new privacy laws in Europe were going to come out, and that would change how you could move patient data between, you know, doctors or specialists that are aren't actually physically at the hospital, but are, providing reads from, anywhere in the world, really. And so we had to figure out, at the moment where most telehealth companies were using forms of either vendor neutral archiving or cloud systems. But when the new GDPR, the European privacy laws, kind of came out, we knew that that wasn't really going to work anymore, that we would basically have to move towards a blockchain. And around 2016, the only real use case for blockchain that had some kind of, development was really in the cryptocurrency space. So I was, like, totally trying to I was trying to educate myself, and almost everything that I was learning, all the education that was kind of accessible online or through e-learning, was really something relating to blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And that's actually where I started to build my technical analysis skills. And why I got so deep into the technical analysis is because, especially back in the day, there's so much volatility in the cryptocurrency space that if you wanted to actually learn how to chart and understand cryptocurrencies, you really needed to understand how the different types of technical analysis worked with volatility. And so I didn't realize how important, like, that season in my life was going to be once I came to trying to scale my day trading, let's say. And so my husband was more, like I said, into, like, the physical assets aspect of investing, where I was much more into the like, oh, let's look at what's happening in telehealth, and let's look at what's happening in like the innovative space. And so everybody used to be like, oh my gosh, Suzanne, you're all over the place. But part of that was being a global person and constantly asking those like harder to answer questions about like where we're going to next, and how is innovation going to take us to the next step. It always made me more curious about those maybe more innovative types of investing. And so that's why I really dug more into stock trading. And so I had a small IRA in America, even though we are now like, totalized in the German system. I had this IRA in the US. And so I was that was self-directed, and I was there developing my stock trading skills. And my husband was kind of like, checking it out, but he wasn't deep into it, because really his passion, I would say, would be more in the actual like physical aspect of like growing a business or owning property.
So since you were into the crypto space at that time, and since his whole philosophy is more like tangible assets, did y'all butt heads a lot when it came to where you wanted to diversify your money and put it into?
No, it was much more that my husband was like, if you are interested in this, and this is something that's interesting to you, then you need to, actually like be into it. So because he was into engineering and robotics and working in that space, in the automotive industry, he oftentimes would think that maybe if like I thought something was kind of new and interesting, that I would want him to explain it to me. And so he was really good at saying, like, if this is interesting to you, go for it, do it. Also, because I think that, one thing with, I don't know if this is, I don't want to say it's African, like, ever generalized, but my husband very much came from a culture where if a woman chose to work, and his mother worked, his mom was actually with the UN peacekeeping forces, so not a small job, but when both parties worked, they had a lot of autonomy over the money that they had. So I can say that my husband gave me a lot of freedom to do like whatever I wanted, as long as I wasn't like doing something that was like harmful to the family, but that's just not my personality anyways. So he was like, okay, go for it. I mean, it's not going to be the end of the world. You just try, see, figure out what's going on. And so, so his big thing was more not to lean on him to follow my passions. He was like, if that's your passion, you do it.
Mhm.
But I'm happy for you to do it. Like, go for it. I'm not going to tell you not to do it, but I'm also not going to tell you that this is going to become my passion, because
Gotcha.
he was like, no, I want to go check out all the robots that ABB and KUKA and all these different companies were like releasing. He's like, that for him was really, really interesting, was really being into the physical aspect of the machinery and the innovation, where I
Yeah.
was more on the like philosophical kind of side, I guess.
Gotcha. Yeah. And you said this was back in what, 2015, 2016 is when you start getting heavy into the crypto
Yeah.
space, right? At that time, I believe did Ethereum even exist during that time?
So at that time, so the big thing at that, I remember, well, it was actually 2017 that, okay, so if I look back, Bitcoin was like the thing, but yeah, all the other like staying power coins have been around. The issue would have been like if you could actually trade them on the like whatever you were using. So if you were
Your
using
platform.
Coinbase or Binance at that time, that it was very difficult. I mean, I remember when like you literally had to like go and meet the person and like change like
Exchange.
they were they used to call them like Bitcoin ATMs. So you'd have to find somebody that actually had Bitcoin to be able to like put it onto your hard wallet. Now that aspect of it, I was like, I don't know how to do that. My husband did help me do all of that, that aspect of it, because I'm not like, I wouldn't say that I'm like the most tech savvy person when it actually comes down to the hardware of like implementing something. So he did help on that side, but to actually learn what I was doing and what I wanted to invest in or buy, that was something completely different. that was like my responsibility to manage.
Because at that point, you already had kids, right? From what I recall, you were saying you already had.
Yes, so I had Soraya, but I didn't have Xavier yet.
Okay, so were you a stay-at-home mom at that point, or were you still working and doing this?
So I literally worked until the day I gave birth with Zavaya. And then I actually reduced my workload on like a maternity leave. But with my daughter, I was still working I was working as a consultant with a number of different entities. So I didn't have maternity leave. So I literally went like right back to work after she was born. I mean, she was with me the whole time, but I was, working from home, mostly working remotely. And then, but with my son, then I had maternity leave because at that point I had actually transitioned to working for a German company and had earned the right to have, the like paid maternity leave.
I take it you speak multiple languages, right?
Yes.
Okay. That's one thing I noticed in Europe. I speak German and English, but when we went over there during the pandemic, which was bad timing, unfortunately for us, I that's the first time I really realized that majority of people in Europe speak at least 3 languages typically. So it's very impressive. But how does that work? Seeing that you're an American citizen, right? Because you were born in the States.
Mhm.
But
And
did
my
you
dad's American also.
okay? And you had dual citizenship, correct?
No, so Syrians actually are not allowed. So Syrian women don't pass citizenship. So technically, I mean, now they're changing the laws. So technically, I could probably, no, I think the law is still pending, but they will change the law. So I could have Syrian citizenship, but no, women don't pass citizenship, sadly. So I was American until until now. Now I can become German. Now I'm like
Yeah.
at the end of my citizenships.
That sucks. Yeah, that sucks. Because
Mhm.
I had dual citizenship until 23, I think. Then I gave it up to join the military and came to
Oh,
States. It
right.
was so stupid. Looking back, I should have kept it because I'm trying to get it back now. But I think there's like a long process or something. But how does that work for like anybody who's interested? Because like you're the
Mhm.
first person that I'm interviewed that's traveling, lives overseas, and everything. How does that work as a American citizen moving from country to country and working in all these different places? Like, do you have to get like a basically a visa? Is it like a temporary citizenship for you to work in these countries until the job no longer exists? How does that exactly work?
Yeah. So anytime that you have to be based in a third location, the company has to basically sponsor you. So they have to go through a residency process and sponsor you for your visa. So that's always how I had always traveled. A lot of countries with Americans, because you can get a visa on arrival, you have like this cushion of being able to travel freely while you're getting your paperwork set up. But that's not available to everyone. So, anytime that I've lived overseas or, after in my adult life, I either had a university sponsorship or I had residency through employment.
Is that pretty hard to get overall? Is it like a long process like in the States where it takes years sometimes?
Yeah, so if you are trying to achieve citizenship, then the process can be take a really long time. If you're just looking for permanent residency, like a green card, then that's much more achievable. And really, usually the only thing you're not allowed to do is vote. So your rights are not that different between permanent residency and citizenship. And so really it's just finding a job that a career that will be able to sponsor you. Now, one of the big changes in Europe, so I think that probably in the 80s and 90s it was a lot easier to find employment as a non-citizen or like as an American in Europe, but now you have the different European competition laws. So a company has to actually prove that there's not somebody that's already in Europe, so somebody that already has residency or a citizen of a European Union country that can fulfill a particular job before they start outsourcing beyond the scope of the European Union. So actually being an American was sometimes not advantageous to me. It did make my paperwork a lot more difficult. And most of my colleagues then were actually European and not American because of that, because it was just a heavier lift um, to get documents to people.
So even with investing side, that's also somewhat different as well, right? Because you can't
Yeah.
really have an American account overseas, right?
Yeah, so I mean, as an American legally, have to trade like an American would. So everything is US based. I can't trade in Germany. I can't trade on a German platform. So I have, everything is US facing in that sense. So it would be like I set everything up in America and then just went on vacation to Europe when it comes to the investment rules. Now, for investors, it's a totally different ballgame when it comes to citizenship because a lot of countries, not companies, countries offer what they call like the golden passport, which is essentially that if you can invest a minimum amount in property or I'm trying to think in property or into like a local company, then you automatically get citizenship. And so, I mean, sometimes it's a process because you actually have to hold that, that property or your investment for a period of time. And then you can get the citizenship. I know countries like Portugal, Malta, Cyprus, Montenegro, there are a bunch of different countries that offer this.
StreamYard, what's going on, y'all? I gotta tell you, I love the platform. This is amazing. However, the lag that happens sometimes, the pixelation, you guys gotta fix this. I'm just saying, you guys seriously can take over on Zoom, but this is insane. If you're okay to talk about your husband, a little bit. So unfortunately, you said he passed in a car accident. So this was in another country, right? He went somewhere else for like a job interview, or was just like working, like
No. So he was doing a project for Seat, and so he went down to their factory in Barcelona, and then during his time there, he was in a car accident and passed. So.
And that was how many years ago?
That was just before the pandemic, so we've just had the 2-year anniversary of his passing.
And then a pandemic happened, which
Mhm.
was terrible news on top of terrible news. And I know where you were living at, they went like full-fledged shutdown. So
Oh yeah. Mhm.
I'm sorry to hear that, obviously. And I'm sure that was pretty shitty news to get when you're on the phone and then your husband is gone. How at that point, what was going through your mind, like moving forward for like you and your family?
Yeah, I mean, like everything it was crazy circumstance. So my husband wasn't supposed to go on this trip. It was like the very last minute, he's like, okay, I have to travel to Spain. I'm going to travel tonight. And I was like, oh, that's like, it's so random. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to then go travel to my sister-in-law, his sister's house in Switzerland. So he left. And then that morning I packed up the car and the kids and I actually went to Switzerland. And the whole time I was driving, like I had no idea what was going on because he wasn't answering his phone. So thankfully that I wasn't like driving and got the news. I arrived in Switzerland and I asked his sister, I was like, have you heard it all from Yannick? Because I haven't heard anything. And then then everything transpired. So then his brother, who lives in Germany, and my sister-in-law and I, the three of us, we went to Spain. We organized with the Cameroonian consulate to have the body expatriated so he could be buried with his family. And then we flew back to Switzerland. I packed up the kids and then we went back to Germany to begin all the paperwork. And the thing is that like you don't even have a second to breathe. Like this happens, and then suddenly you're organizing with a forensic lab, the police, his employer, and all that. You're like you're working with so many different people that you don't even have a moment to realize like what's going on, and that you just have to keep going because there's so much happening. You can't kind of like lose your rhythm because there are just so many people and you don't have a lot of time, right? Because like the body is sitting in a morgue and you like need to go there, you need to identify it, get all the permission so that you can expatriate the body, make sure that all the insurance companies are understand what's going on. They have all the documents that they need. So it's so much organizing that your body literally goes into this kind of like organization mode. And I'm not the kind of person that's like, oh, I love being organized all the time. But it was kind of like, those moments that's like super high stress and something changes. You just realize you have to get things done in a very timely fashion, or otherwise you'll end up with like a significant catastrophe. I mean, you don't want to like wake up to a phone call and like the body never left Spain. And also coordinating everyone now to get to Cameroon, to get our visas, get our flights, get our passports. We don't know when the body is going to arrive in Cameroon. So it's all kind of like this huge chaos all the way through January and February. And then, by the time we get to Cameroon, it's a big ordeal because you have all the ceremonial um, the ceremonial aspects of burying somebody, especially somebody who dies young and so suddenly, and to really make sure that we cared for the parents as well, because I mean this was like a huge shock to them. And we were really nervous that the news of this would just be not just devastating for me but for his entire family. I mean, it was just so shocking. You can't absorb that kind of news easily. It takes a long time to believe it's happening, and then also to respond to that belief. Like it took me, I mean, I don't even think that I really realized that my husband was gone until probably close to the 2 year point. So anytime I heard the door open, I was like, my brain was automatically like, oh, Yannick's going to come walking through the door. So it just was like your body never really like absorbs such big news, but the rest of your life keeps moving forward, and you realize you have to respond. Like I'm going to start getting bills, and my husband was really the main breadwinner because even though I work in law and that's I studied, everybody's like, but you're a lawyer, you make lots of money. I'm like, I work in the charitable sector. Like I
There's no
promise you,
here.
refugees and people in prison, they don't pay very well.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't need to, like, the thing about my career is that I didn't need to pursue an aggressive paying career because my husband had a very good career. So it was kind of like at that point I could really do what I was passionate about, and what my husband also, like my husband was also really passionate about the work that I did. He really loved that he was able in that way to like contribute, that I could have my time to do things that I believed in and that he also believed in. So that kind of sense of camaraderie, then you kind of realize that that's gone. And now you have to work, you have to pay all your bills. And so everything kind of hits this kind of like wall of reality. And then you have to start making things happen. And that's really where I realized that, okay, if I'm going to get over this hurdle, the big thing that I'm going to have to kind of overcome is the like changing my month to month income situation. And the thing is, I couldn't really change my cost of living because I couldn't just like move out of my house or like change my kids' school. And like, I didn't want to create a whole bunch of chaos for them as well. That would just have been way too much change all at one time. So by not being able to like minimize my like month to month expenses because I didn't want to make any changes on the children, it meant that I had to significantly increase my income because now my husband's income was basically gone. And being that it was COVID and that Barcelona was totally shut down. So
Yeah.
I didn't even actually get my husband's death certificate until almost 14 months after his accident.
Wow.
So you think like, oh, people are like, but didn't you get the life insurance? Didn't you?
You can't get
No,
any of that
like
until
how you
everything's
cannot,
done.
I cannot prove, like everybody knows that my husband is gone, but there
Mhm.
is no documentation that my husband is gone.
Yeah.
So so that just kind of created a whole COVID kind of like just put a bomb in the whole ability to be efficient in applying for anything. Like I couldn't go anywhere and say, even, just like something silly with the child, the child benefit. In Germany they pay it every month. In the US they pay it once a year. But I couldn't even get that like into my name because I couldn't prove that my husband was gone, that he had passed. So, I mean, or closing bank accounts or changing the name on bills. You can't do any of that stuff because you can't prove that the person is gone. I mean, technically, it just looks like you're trying to do some kind of funny like bank
Yeah,
fraud or
fraud.
wire fraud. So, you just have to then like sit on your hands and waiting for this death certificate to come. So between COVID and being totally locked down, being quarantined, it was like I would have gone crazy. So I was like, okay, my favorite thing to do is learn. I love studying. I mean, I went to law school and I finished my law degree in 2 years. I mean,
What?
I love studying
Wow.
and and I'm kind of like one of those persons that, like, if I have a goal, I want to be like all in, right? I mean, maybe people are like, yeah, we can see the level of intensity and passion that you have. But because of so at this point, I had a lot of knowledge about trading stocks, how to use my platform, that kind of stuff. That information was there, and I knew all about, like, in that sense, I knew a lot about cryptocurrencies, how to trade them, how to do the charting, and how to do technical analysis. So I didn't use all those like technical skills because I wasn't within my stock trading, I wasn't trying to day trade. So I wasn't trying to like read the technicals in that sense. I was like looking for charts and general information about what was happening in overall trends, like on a month basis, not day-to-day basis. But I kind of realized that, okay, it was just way too stressful with two small kids. So when my husband's accident happened, it was like a couple weeks after my daughter's third birthday, and my son was 6 months old. So, when I called my parents to like tell them, called all of our parents actually, my mom, my dad, their spouses, and of course my husband's parents, to tell them. I mean, I I tell people, I'm like, no, literally, like I was at the morgue identifying my husband's body, and like my whole dress was like covered in milk because my son was in Switzerland and here I am in Spain. And it just never occurred to me that this is going to be a problem. But to show how young my son was, I mean, he was still, he was what hadn't even been weaned. Like, it's just one day I had to go to Spain and leave him behind, and that was, just that occasion. But so, you're in quarantine, and I have the two kids, and so I'm like, okay, I don't want to do stock trading. That's really intense because you're basically like having to trade a high number of shares and constantly. And then you have to be watching the markets. And I was like, this is not what I like about trading. And this isn't really what I want to do. And so this is really what birthed my like deep dive into options trading. But it also kind of created this world of the candlestick journey. So that's really where during this quarantine period is where the book series was, the idea of it was born, and also for the Trade Speakeasy was during that like hardcore time of quarantining.
Do you feel that maybe part of the reason why you got obsessed with options and the book and everything was also another form of coping to keep your mind busy? Because it sounds like, I mean, everything was like really bad timing. You have two kids, you have this traumatic experience, and you don't even have time to breathe or to, I guess, really process what just happened. And now
Mhm.
you're like, COVID happens, you're stuck at home with two kids. You're like, there's no income coming in anymore. I need to figure something out. Do you feel like that whole process kind of helped you a little bit on?
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's a reality that, you can train every day for your life to do something. But until the pressure of that event is kind of impending, you notice that like your whole body like moves into a different kind of overdrive. And so, I was telling my dad, I was like, I really feel like I decided I wanted to do a marathon, and I moved like to Ethiopia or to Kenya to learn to run marathons at like the highest possible altitude so that, I could, like put my body in that like extreme level of, learning to cope in the harshest environment and this like adverse environment, so that when I came down to easier environment, I'd perform better. And that's, I mean, that's really what my husband's death did, right? It took all the flowery language or hopeful language that you might have. Like if you want to buy a house and you're like, okay, well, you can't do it this month but it's okay because you have next month. When when the sole bread, like the main breadwinner of your family just disappears, there is no more like, I hope that next month this, or I hope that next month that, because everything that you delay starts to compound to a point that if you just leave it compounding, you will end up with significant problems that cannot be solved. Like you will really end up putting yourself in just, an absolutely miserable situation. And I think having worked with so many refugees and seeing what it's like to come back from like literally losing everything and then having to start your life from zero, whether it's emotionally or mentally the healthiest thing to do, those that kind of like just said, like, regardless of what's happening around me, I have to hit the ground sprinting. They are the people that at least get enough traction or momentum that they can like kind of keep going, even if they're limping to the end, but they actually get all the way through that like horrific period in their life. And I think maybe I saw that also with my mom. Like when my parents separated, she didn't just like sit around doing nothing. She just said, even if I have to take a job that's not like what I'm like qualified to do, something, below me in that sense, like I'll go and do it and I'll do great at it and I'll get great reviews and and so I think that having had all of those experiences, that kind of falling apart right at the beginning is not going to do you any favors, because you're still going to wake up and all of the same problems are going to be there. Yeah, definitely I found something that I knew I already loved and I wouldn't regret. I mean, it's not like gambling or some kind of weird habit that 2 3 years later you're going to be like, oh, why did I spend all my time doing that? Like I knew that by learning I would always be benefited, and by having the structure in my day, like not having any kind of like normal day plan besides like that the children wake up and they're hungry and need to be fed. There is no rhythm to your day. But if you start to structure your day, like I'm going to study this at this time, and then my kids and I are going to go and do this, and then we're going to go and do this. Then while they're taking their nap, I'm going to study this. And when they go to bed at night, I'm going to do this. Because otherwise you just have like sleepless nights for no reason. You like have nothing to show for it. But this gave me something that I felt like, okay, I won't regret. Like 1 year from now, I won't look back and regret that I learned all the candlestick patterns and that I read, the Steve Nyson books, and that I did a bunch of different courses, like deep diving into candlestick patterns, and that, whatever, like learning options, even if I decide I hate them, learning all of those things isn't going to harm me in any way. So it's, better I do that than like develop some weird overeating habit because of stress or something like that. This was like, okay, I can deal with this. This is not a terrible habit to have. So that's, that it put me in a very high pressure situation, because there was just no room for forgiveness if like I just didn't pick myself up.
Yeah, you definitely took your energy and you put it in a positive direction. I know a lot of people don't in a situation like yours. They would,
Mhm.
resort to substance abuse, alcohol, or other things like overeating, like you were saying. I've been through phases where I did not direct my energy in the most positive direction. So I totally get what you're saying. Once you started learning, like how long did it take you to really deep dive in, like before you did your first trade and you realized like, oh, this is profitable? Like how long did it take you?
So I had already been trading in that sense. So I was really confident that, if I could, that really all what I was trying to do now was to scale my activities. And the question would be with options, how long it would how long it would take me to really get comfortable with trading options. And that's where that was a big problem for me. So my first mistake was that I actually paid for a class on options trading, went through the class, and then realized I'm probably not any the wiser in that sense. And I don't know if I'm like, I was, looking at the charts, and from what I understood from my technical analysis, I didn't feel like I had kind of like given myself all the benefits. Like I hadn't hedged all the risks. So then I actually went back and I was like, okay, I need to find something that is really like a legitimate course by a legitimate teacher. And so that was really difficult to find an options trading course. There were a lot of stuff that was out there, and it was all just really mostly like long calls and long puts. And that wasn't really what I was looking for. I didn't know what I was looking for. So I did TDA Ameritrade. They have like their webcast series, and there is a teacher on there, Barbara Armstrong. She teaches like basically like an intro to all the different kinds of option strategies. And I literally just like went through like four the whole series. She goes through it every quarter. She like starts from the beginning, goes through. So she's doing it with live charts, and it comes out on a weekly basis. So I like went back to like 3 4 quarters before the quarter I was in, and then like watched them all. And then I was like, okay, this is more what I'm looking for, but not exactly, because I really wanted structured trades. I needed to know that whatever I was doing, it was low risk, because obviously I have no income. So well, not no income, I had a little bit of income, but it wasn't meeting our needs. So I knew that if I like start taking money from my savings to do this, I won't have like somewhere else to suddenly like take the money from. And so because of that, I was extremely like focused on, no, I need to take low risk, high probability trades. I need to find that asymmetrical risk reward. So I'm not looking for 1 to 1 or 1 to 2. I'm really looking for really structured trades that are, that have a much higher probability of being correct. But that does mean that then you have to have really strong technical skills, and you need to be trading with the options. You have to be trading more than buy low, sell high philosophy. When you trade options in a binary way, you're already taking what is high risk and then like leveraging that risk. And I was like, that's not what I want to do. I actually want to mitigate the potential risk. So I want to trade like, I'm structuring my trade so I am trading volatility, I am trading gamma, I am trading a delta drift. I'm trying to actually take an aspect of the Black-Scholes equation and then say, this is where I'm trying to make my money. Not that I'm hoping all of the Greeks do what they're supposed to because price did what I was expecting, because that's how people end up like with so much slippage. And then they end up, yeah, they might have one boomba win, but then they're just like losing dollars here and dollars there, that in the end they're not making anything. And I was like, I'm not into that. And to me, that just didn't speak to me. It didn't make any sense for me to take those kinds of risks with my income at that time. So I really started then like deep diving into the Greeks. So everything I could find from Chartered Market Technicians Association there, and then like from the CMTs who are trading these like multi-leg option strategies, who are the top educators on butterflies, ratio spreads, diagonals, calendars, and then TDA, they have a lot of educational resources from people who are licensed to teach. And I was like, and then buying all the books, any books I could find, and then deep diving. And so that's really where, that's where that kind of educational level went up. So there was a time where I was in like a, like a group, like a Telegram group. And it was like 20 of us that were friends, and everybody was trading different strategies. So we were just friends with each other, and everybody was doing whatever they wanted. And I remember in the beginning of 2021 that people were really surprised because I probably started out with the smallest account, but I was the one that was like flipping my account quite regularly. And so then everybody was like, wait, you're not taking losses. And, or when I was taking losses, maybe they weren't as significant. And how are you doing that? And so I was like, oh, yeah, I'm doing, and some of these trades I wouldn't take now because the market dynamics have changed generally. But, I was trading a lot of short butterflies, a lot of laddering into in the money put credit spreads, in the money call credit spreads, and then really like taking advantage of the volatility shift. So I was significantly reducing my risk by taking in a lot of credit and then really mitigating my potential losses. And so when you see that your potential reward is high and your risk is low, you then have the confidence to say, I can keep rinsing and repeating this. Because even if I take a loss, I'm not going to take a max loss because I'm not waiting until expiration to realize that price didn't do what I'm expecting. But I'm also like on days where it's unclear to me like what the trend is, I can put on a trade that is directionless. So I don't care what the market does. Like if it's going to go up or if it's going to go down, I don't need to be a genius. All I need to do is do my math correctly and make sure that I know that the price is going to move because of the amount of volatility that's in the market, but I don't already know which direction it's going to choose and how long it's going to sustain that movement. So, for a lot of people, they were like, oh, wait, you can do that. Like you can gamma scalp, you can volatility scalp, you can look for volatility or volatility. Like those things exist. And so that's then where the classes started. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm happy to do, we can hop on a Zoom. And then everybody was like, that was way too complicated. Like, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about anymore. I've lost the plot. So then I had to start really like breaking down the concepts and then making sure that, people that hadn't done what I did, which was like literally drink from a fire hydrant, that wanted, the information and in more digestible form. I created that class for them because it didn't exist actually. I couldn't find it. And so that's really where the Trade Speakeasy begun. And sorry, just a moment. No, I don't need it. No, can you please? Didn't even come to that place. Look, so I put something. You want to see Betsy Doe? Betsy Doe? Betsy Doe, okay. Just had to distract them.
Is this if I zoom in on you, is it dark again?
Yeah, it's totally black.
That is so weird. Okay.
So it might be fine. It might just be like on my side that it's not showing. Oh, but now I have a lag.
Lag again. Yeah. So I won't do that. If I do this, did it go to black?
Nope. So when it's on you, I see you. It's just when you put it only on me, then.
What about now?
Here it's fine.
Here's like that fine. Okay, I'm just gonna go this and that. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you about what you kind of just you went down a road of things that I haven't even heard of, which shows that I probably should need to hit the books a little bit more because you're talking about strategies I've never heard of. Well, not that I haven't heard of. I just never really deep dived into it. It's typically, calls and puts. That's kind of what I focus on. But like you said, there's also other ways we can minimize the risk, right? Mm-hmm. But you said you first started off, you went into a group and you realized it wasn't for you, right? Mm-hmm. I don't need you to say what group it was or anything, but did you realize it wasn't for you because it just seemed like it was more gambling than anything?
So it wasn't that the group in that sense, like this morning group that I was in, everybody was just trading their own thing. And
Okay.
and so, but what I was looking for, I guess maybe I didn't know that it was called multi-leg options trading at that time. Like I couldn't necessarily like say what I was looking for. And so I think that I just needed more tools to be able to ask the questions correctly so that I could get that information. So the course that I did was, was brilliant for people who are like have never traded before. They don't know how to utilize their platform. It really takes you from like getting up into the starting blocks and then getting up off those starting blocks. But if you're trying to discover, a range of strategies of what you might want to trade or what fits your personality, I didn't find that there were a lot of courses out there that were willing to give you, a range of options a range of option strategies to trade. So even like with the come up cousins, they were so focused on out the money calls or out the money leaps that when people start, it was like that was like the one strategy that they talk a lot about. And I also did IWT, Terry Agioma's course, and that is also like trying to set up reversals basically, so that you're like, when you see a particular in her setup, she has, you're looking for a number of things that will cause the price to move either, in a bullish or a bearish manner, depending on where the price is on the chart. And so you kind of wait for that setup to come and then trade it. But that's not what I wanted to trade. So it wasn't the problem of the course. It's that I don't want to trade out the money leaps, out the money long calls, and I don't necessarily want to wait for like specific reversal candles. And of course, I didn't have enough capital to do something um, like Wall Street Trapper or Red Panda, the EYL, Market Mondays, because I didn't have enough capital to get started. So in that sense, like I was already investing, so I was already doing, what Trapper and Ian talk about in that sense. But I wanted to find something that was a bit scalable that would give me, money that I could rinse and repeat. And I personally didn't see when the chip shortage started in 2021. I did not see that like out the money long positions was the way to go. And I never would trade. I mean, anybody who knows me, I always tell them, like, I don't have a problem with leaps. I would just never trade a leap. I would never position myself. I would never open a long position without also being short. I don't want to be like if you're doing your account and your beta weighting, you have to see like how bullish you are, and leaps are essentially 100% bullish. So it doesn't cope with any kind of inconsistency in the market. It needs one consistent move in order to keep all of the Greeks moving positionally positive for you. So I do leaps, but I do them all in diagonal spreads. So I always enter my short position at the money, and I always enter with at least one short position, either above or below it, depending on what my thesis is. And then that way I minimize my cost basis. So into 2020, to the end of 2021, I was basically rinsing my diagonals. So every time my long call would get down to the 70 delta, I would roll it up and I would expand the number of contracts. So, I started out, let's say, like I could only afford, I think in the beginning it was like I had 8 long calls that were 2 years out. And then I sold at the 10 delta about 3 months, no, 4 months out a bit, at the 20 delta. And I could then afford this diagonal spread. And then every time that SPY would drop, then I would roll up my position and expand the number of contracts that I had. So every time I was like moving it back up to the 50 and then expanding the number of contracts without changing the expiration date, and then selling, adding new short positions. So, if I had entered with 8 and I had 8 short positions, now I've rolled up and now maybe I have 12 long positions. So I can sell 4 new shorts at a further out expiration. And then as time is moving on and those short positions are decaying in value, either you can close them and add a new short position for a further out date. But essentially, when I got to the end of 2021, I had hundreds of leaps. And I don't want to say I didn't pay anything for them, but it was pretty much that because I had mitigated all the cost of entry by using the rolling strategy, by always having short positions around it, by making sure that I was delta hedged. And anytime there was a drawdown, like the minute that, like SPY maybe dropped a little bit, all those short positions, because they were much shorter in time, they all went to zero value and I could buy to close them for like 2 cents. And then when price started being bullish again, I could sell them and take in more, take in more capital so that I could then have more calls. But instead of just like sitting and waiting for each price movement when price is inconsistent, like I don't want to put myself in a situation where I'm closing positions when the price is moving against me out of nervousness. By having that short position on, I have nothing to be nervous about because I'm actually probably not really financially exposed because I didn't actually pay that much money for the position. But because I positioned it as a diagonal or a calendar spread, I didn't enter it as just a long call. And so for me, I didn't really understand why, like so many people were losing money so fast during that chip shortage. And they kept asking, they're like, why aren't you also stressed out? You're a single mom of 2 kids, like in a corona crisis. Like, why are you not just like overwhelmed? And I'm like, because even if the whole thing went to zero, I didn't actually lose any money.
Yeah.
And then people were like,
yeah.
how? So
I,
then people were like, no, I need to learn how to do covered calls. I need to learn how to do protective short puts. I need to learn how to do married puts. I need to learn to do protective puts. I need to learn how to sell a strangle. Okay, I see what you're getting at, but now I need to learn how to hedge volatility. Well, then that's how the trade speakeasy came to be because it ended up being like tens and tens and tens and tens of hours of like moving people along in this journey of how do you invest and it doesn't actually cost you money from your pocketbook.
And so you cover all that stuff in your Trade Speakeasy because I know I'm going to be reviewing it soon. I haven't gone through it yet, but wow, I thought your stuff was going to be basic. This is how you do a call. This is how you do a put. No, but I'm glad you spoke on that because I interviewed Mark and him and I had a discussion as well, and I lost. I was in a lot of leaps, over leverage significantly, and one of the biggest issues I had was the fact that I didn't take profit when I should have. I didn't know how to properly hedge. I didn't know, for some reason, puts just made me nervous. It's like a psychological thing. I was like, I'm hedging against my own positions. It just didn't make sense. And then I ended up reading this book called Intrinsic, and it kind of changed the entire dynamic of how I trade moving forward. Obviously, you're right. Doing leaps has for the most part, you're bullish, right? And the market has to go in an upward trend. Obviously, 2021 was a little rough, was a roller coaster, and now it's definitely been a roller coaster because everything's kind of in a bearish territory right now. But I learned myself that if I'm going to do leaps, I will only do at the money or significantly out of the money, but I mean like a minimum amount of money. For example, the only positions I'm currently in, I'm in an XLV 140 strike, I think, for 2024, and I have an XLK, which I was significantly down. Obviously, the market went up a little bit, so it's going back up. But XLK dropped down to like 160. I got a 170. I was not going to go get the 200. I was not going to get the 205. And I know there's possibilities where you can get those positions, and just a slight move will push that premium up real quick. Then it will tank again if there's any minor pullback. And I didn't like that feeling. So I told myself right now I'm just scalping for the most part and doing monthlies. Maybe the longest out, it's typically monthlies right now until I see a clear direction for the market. And then I may get into some more elite positions. But I've been told by multiple people, they're like, you know how to trade. you know how to trade, but your emotions get in your way sometimes, which
Mhm.
I'm definitely working on. But I was also told you need to learn how to do other methods such as strangle, straddle, and things you were talking about, which I'm going to start looking into. And I'm glad that your course covers that, because I don't see a lot of people covering that in their
Mhm.
courses, especially within the community that you were talking about, the community. Like a lot of those people, it's just very basic calls,
Yeah.
put, and leaps. That's for the most
Mhm.
part, that's it. A lot of people don't talk about those other strategies that you talked about. And it sounded like you learned majority of that stuff for free off of TD Ameritrade. Am I right?
Um, so not all, not all just from there, but definitely watching how they're doing all the different strategies in combination with each other in different market environments helped me kind of like, okay, I read this in a book and now I'm like actually seeing it play out. And the thing is that every strategy works different in different markets. So like right now, the stress that we're in with having such low liquidity, there are certain strategies that are going to be work amazing, but there are going to be other strategies that just bomb because of the fact that there is no liquidity or there's very low liquidity in the market. And depending on what happens with the bond markets, if the rates don't actually, if rates don't incentivize people to put their money into the bond market, there could be cash coming back into equities because bonds are just not getting anybody a return. But but when you are having those high liquidity changes, there are certain strategies that work really well because you're actually focused on trading volatility and you're not focused on trading the price of the movement of the price of the underlying. So so yeah, I mean like even now with this, with this kind of drop down, even in, like with my friends at EYL, because I am in part of EYL, and in our Texas group, we're always chatting with each other. And when people were losing on some of their positions, I told them, start selling covered calls every time it's dropping. Sell covered calls, take in income, minimize your cost basis. And then when price was kind of like on certain underlyings where it was kind of chopping around, I was like, sell your strangles, sell your strangles, sell your strangles. If there was going to be a pop, I'm like, get in a call, write it up, bank a bit of cash, and then, so that you can continue to minimize your cost basis on blue chip stocks. So, if it's the Microsoft, if it's the Apple, you don't want to get rid of those stocks, keep them into perpetuity, but definitely be using options to be consistently bringing income back into your account. So even now, like in my last class, we were actually talking um, about this last bull rally, and a lot of people were talking about like, why was there this like huge bull rally? So we were talking a lot about like delta neutrality, how market makers and brokers are trading, where those flows are coming from, and how Vana and Charm are affecting the movement. So basically, there were so many long puts on the SPX that eventually it dropped to a point where market makers couldn't actually take on any more risk because they couldn't hedge against that long position anymore because all those long puts are getting more valuable, right? As the price was dropping through the whole first quarter. And so, then market makers start to get under stress. So they start increasing premiums. So then it's just too expensive to buy those long positions. But then what ends up happening is that they realize price isn't dropping anymore because there really isn't any liquidity. There isn't anybody pushing it in any direction. So as it started to bottom out, you saw institutions like Morgan Stanley and JP Morgan just close like tens of thousands of long puts right at that 4,500. And because if you're down at the 4,500, you're almost at expiration because that was coming into OPEX week, and you're at options expiration. They're about to roll off. They're going to lose all of their value if the price does start to move back up. So what do? They close all their long put positions, and the broker can close all of the hedging positions to keep them delta neutral. And so that's why you saw this huge move up. wasn't because like new buyers were coming into the market. It was because all the downward pressure on the opposite side of the option chain had basically been taken off because they wanted to close the long puts in profit. And so that's why we got this big, this big massive move. But I was like, this is not where you suddenly start to say to yourself,
Let's
like,
go long.
yeah, let's go long, because the liquidity is not driving us in a bullish direction. There's still too much uncertainty.
Well, then fine. If that's what you want, then let's have it out right now.
So tell me about your book, The Candlestick. It's like this ancient Japanese candlestick pattern that applies to the stock market.
Yeah. So basically, when we're looking at any stock chart, and that we're printing the candles, depending on the time frame you're looking at, each candle can represent a day, and it's showing you what is happening, like at the open, the close, and then what the price movement was for that trading period, whether it be if you're on a 15-minute chart, 1 hour chart, daily chart, weekly. And so what it's allowing you to understand is what the sentiment in the market is. So the gentleman who basically drew up all of these charts, he himself was a rice trader, and a very wealthy rice trader. And he spent years basically trying to like formulate all of this data and consolidate the information and figure out what was the most important information for the coming day, in order to determine if he thought that the price of rice would be high, or if the price of really commodities would be low, and this would be a good time to buy. So what he found is that the psychology of the traders, or the psychology of the actual market, because at that time, like, the commodities market was a physical market where people would go and buy goods, and the price would go up as supply diminished. So what he started to figure out is that there was a lot of kind of boasting in the personality of those who were wealthy. And the wealthiest people didn't want to come in and buy when the price was cheap, because they didn't want to be seen as like as buying like the buying like something that didn't have any value. And so then what would end up happening is that, like, as the day would go on, well, two things could happen. As the day would go on, if others didn't come in and start buying up supply, then the price had to drop significantly, right? In order to get people to buy the rice, because they needed to move the product. And then but he also started to notice that if others started to come in and buy up supply, then between the wealthy people who were waiting to buy, then they would start creating this like bidding war that would run up price. And so that's where he created these different candlestick names. And it was to give him an impression of what the sentiment would be day in and day out, so that he knew if he wanted to like stockpile rice at that period in time, or if he wanted to wait until there was more supply in the market. And then, of course, seeing how like rumors would affect people's like buying patterns. So that's where we have the, buy the rumor, sell the news. It comes from him, really. And like the philosophy of what people are doing at the physical, like fruit market, fish market, rice market, grain market, like actual movement of commodities. And that's where futures trading came from, was from Japan, from and then the whole analysis was born out of his strategy and the drawings of the candlestick patterns. So the names of the candlestick patterns are kind of humorous. And as I was trying to memorize them, I would play with my kids at the same time. And so I would try to like make up these silly stories that didn't mean really anything, that, they thought it was the funniest thing ever. And especially my daughter, since she was older, Xavier didn't really understand. He was only about a year old at that time. But then I started to realize, oh, these stories are actually like could be something, because somebody who's learning and doesn't know anything, this might actually help them. And so I started like in this, I was telling you that I had this kind of group of friends that were all trading. Sometimes I would be like, oh, wait, but there's a shooting star candle, or that's, the three white soldiers. And so I was like saying the names. I didn't know what they were. So I was having to like basically give the information of what the candlestick patterns meant. But then that's really, I thought, oh, could actually be useful. And so that's when I did like basically now we're in the test phase. So we've done the first book. Oh, it's not because of the virtual background. You can't see it, and now you can't see me. So it has to be behind something darker. But so the first book is The Doji's Rumble, and it's really looking at some of the basic bullish candlestick patterns, and then how to look for confirmation. So if you're looking for a reversal, how to see multiple candlesticks and find that confirmation. So, are you getting a bullish engulfing candle, or are you getting a hammer or an inverted hammer? How strong is that bullish movement? And then looking for that hammer of agreement, or looking for that secondary pattern that confirms the move.
All right, everybody. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I'm gonna show her little writing there on the bottom. You guys can check out. Obviously, this is some technical issues. I don't know if it's on my end or their end or StreamYard's end. I'm going to try to figure out. So moving forward, the other interviews will not have to be bogged down by this type of technical issues. It really sucks because this is I hate putting guests in a situation like this where the quality is not as good as it should be. I left Zoom because Zoom would just crash in the middle of me doing interviews, and I would have to download the interview and restart it over. So hopefully moving forward, StreamYard will either do an update or maybe it's my end. I don't know. We're trying to go with it as needed. So let me bring my guest back on one more time. All right, let's hide the banner, and hopefully there is no delay now.
I hope so. I think it might have also been the virtual background.
Potentially a virtual background. I don't know if it's if maybe it's because it's causing too much data stream through the internet or something, or what. But I don't know. So, but anyways, back to the back to the book. So you said
I can actually show you
There we go. Okay, perfect. And they can buy it where, off of your website?
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon, or you can find it on our website, candlestickjourney.com.
And is your plan to have multiple books related to that for kids? And is that the plan? Are you working on another one right now?
Yeah, so the second book is in process, but what we really want to see is kind of a strong community behind the book, that both how we've presented the candlestick patterns was educational, both for the children, but also for the reader. So one of the things when I was first like in these different communities, that the kind of the word that everybody was talking about was, we really want to get more Black and brown people into investing and into the trading community. And it's not easy, right? There's like a kind of a heavy lift of determining, like for somebody to say, I don't know anything and now I want to get into learning about investing. And so I felt like a children's book was a really non-threatening way that actually somebody could give the book to somebody who had children, but who they were interested in the adult actually having, like, maybe feeling like they could learn about investing without it being too overwhelming. So this was kind of like, kind of a meeting of the minds between maybe somebody who loves investing and is doing it, and then their family members. Because for a lot of people, what I realized, or a lot of the people that were in my different trading groups, was that, as you're learning, you're always going to face losses. And if you don't know how to aggressively utilize trade management and risk management, those losses can be big. And it happens to every like new learner. So a lot of people felt intimidated because they knew that their family probably suspected that they had some losses. And so they felt a bit maybe embarrassed to talk about, you should also get into investing, even though they were still kind of getting over the educational hump themselves. And I thought, okay, a children's book is totally non-threatening. So the art in the book is actually really made for the reader, less so than for necessarily the child. So the art is more high level so that it's more visually pleasing in that sense. And then the back of the book is actually a glossary of terms and sources. So the book is a poetry, and each book has a poem, and that poem or song, I should say, um, is introducing a few of the candlestick patterns. And then in the back of the book, we introduce the name of the candlestick pattern and what they mean. And then we actually show them like the image in the story, then which candlestick it represents, and then what it looks like on the chart. And then also some images of what might look similar to that candlestick pattern and why it doesn't necessarily like meet the standard of being called a bullish engulfing or a hammer doji or so on and so forth. And then all the images are then put together. And
Together.
that's so it's for adults and for children. And that's really what I had in my mind to help, people that were in a similar situation like me. Like you want to spend time with your kids, but you also know that you have other things that you need to do. And so this way you're actually killing two birds with one stone.
Wow. Thank you so much for telling us about that. Guys, please support this book. Please check out her website. Once again, I was going to put the banner up there, but tell them again where they can find you on social media and where they can sign up for the trading group as well as buy your book.
Yeah, so the book is available at candlestickjourney.com, and we're on Instagram at Candlestick Journey. And the Trade Speakeasy is also available at www.tradespeakeasy.com and on Instagram at Trade Speakeasy. And we also have a YouTube channel where I try to introduce some of these introductory topics so that people can kind of get to know me and get to know what my kind of presentation style is so that they don't feel like, oh, I bought a course, but maybe they don't, you know, sometimes it's just the personality of the teacher. You want to know who
Correct.
they are, why they're talking about it, why is it important to them. So there we introduce some of the introductory pieces like, short calls, short puts, strangles, looking at, why, what's going on with the Fed rate hikes, what's going on with bonds, try to introduce some of those macro topics and bring them down so that they're actionable for a retail investor, or at least for a retail investor to kind of feel like, okay, if I'm looking at the broader markets and I'm seeing all this chaos, does that chaos actually bleed into the equity that I'm trading or the sector that I'm trading? So the YouTube channel tries to give people some of that feedback.
Got you. And do you trade on a daily basis still?
So I don't know. I don't need to anymore. That's yeah, I don't need to. So 2020 and 2021 were really good to me, and not only that, it gave me the opportunity to basically fill up all my retirement accounts,
Hmm.
and now those are able to grow in a more stable manner. But so a big part of the trade speakeasy is perfecting profitability in adverse markets. So this market is not a market you want to be just trading every day. You really have to be like once, like a little bit a step ahead of the situation, because you can easily get caught out thinking that, oh, this one strategy is going to work regularly. And there's some strategies that, like right now, there's enough volatility for me to trade some of my favorite strategies. They don't work every single day of the week. So they need a certain amount of theta to perform, or they need not as much theta to perform. And so because of that, you wouldn't want to trade them every single day. But I still trade regularly, but not every single day like I had been in 2020
In the
and
past, yeah, not as
2021.
aggressive anymore. Got you. And obviously, you do buy stocks and just hold for long-term investment as well.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us about some of your favorite ones, like your top three?
So, really, I like the right now the big ones that I had been trying to buy were in the energy sector. So I really like, Chevron, Exxon, ConocoPhillips. Those three are great. They pay phenomenal dividends. And, we're in a season where supply is really low. So, we'll continue to have demand. I don't think that we're going to hit a bottom. I don't think that we're going to just retrace this bull run that we've been seeing. So those were some that I really put out in the group, trying to get people to get into the commodities. So, looking at ETFs or ETFs or equities that are facing the commodities market. So, trying to get people to get into wheat and to corn, either on an ETF that they prefer. So that was a big thing that I was, encouraging people to do. But I like to hold, things like SPY, having that total market solution, and the fact that there's so much liquidity, you can always sell against your positions. So, you can generate a lot of income by doing that if you have the underlying shares. So
About
then
a minimum of 100, you need at least a minimum of 100 is what you need to be able to do that. Awesome. Thank you again so much for coming on. This was a pleasure. I think I learned a lot about you, and I'm definitely going to check out your course. I'm going to buy your book, of course, right when we're done with this. I'm going to buy it. So I would love for my kids to go through it as well, because that's the reason why I'm doing all of this, is because I want to pass on a skill to my kids, so they don't have to be stuck in a situation where they're relying on a 9 to 5, especially ones they don't want to do. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing, for the community, for your family, for everything. I really do appreciate it. Do you have any last words before we end this session?
Oh, well, really, thank you so much for having me. I am a fan of yours,
Thank you.
and the channel. And the big thing is that I think, okay, so this is something that is really like important to me. It's something that's really on my heart. Is that there is a racial wealth gap, and the only way that we're going to be able to close that gap is by investing and accessing the equities market. We can't close that gap just by working harder or working 2 or 3 jobs or working until we're 90 years old. That's not going to happen. But we have to be more savvy. We have to increase our vocabulary so that we are constantly able to have these higher level conversations with people that have been trading through multiple markets. Right now, there are a lot of really young traders. And I mean, some people might also consider me young, but I'm 40, and there are people way younger than me. There are people that don't remember what 2018 looked like. There are people that don't remember the dot-com bubble. There are people that don't remember the Enron scandal. They don't remember what that did to the market, to the housing markets, how bonds were affecting something else. They don't know what the energy crisis. This isn't the first energy crisis we've been in. We were in a situation where a barrel of oil was well over 100, and then suddenly it was like down at 30. And the entire energy sector was laying people off left and right. 2020 and 2021 was like learning to swim in a bathtub. 2022 and 2023 is going to be like swimming in the English Channel. Like, you need to know how to swim, and you need to be good at it. And if the conversations you're having, if the people who are educating you are not consistently pushing you to continue to really learn how the different angles of the entire markets are working and impacting and affecting each other, you may continue just to face losses. But I seriously believe that, we need to do better, because we do need to do better for our children, because we are facing a racial wealth gap. And that racial wealth gap doesn't get closed when we're just taking unnecessary losses and paying a bunch of brokerage fees. That doesn't do anything for anybody. I mean, I really think that probably 20 years from now, there's going to be whatever Netflix 2040 is. There's going to be a Netflix documentary on how much money the Black and brown, well, really the Black community most significantly, lost during 2020 and 2021 using investment schemes that did not work during one of the most bullish markets in the history of man. And then while everyone else was increasing their wealth, we were actually making the gap worse for ourselves, because it's not just about getting people into investing. Yes, in 2020, that was extremely important, introducing people to investing that hadn't been investing. But just investing for the sake of investing doesn't make anybody money. You can end up consistently at the wrong end of deals and lose huge amounts of money. And I used to have, like, that's, one of the reasons my course was created. I mean, I've had grown men call me crying because the amount of money they've lost from their retirement account using strategies totally unhedged and not knowing what to do next and not understanding how to do it. And or having single mothers calling me, that they've, like, basically lost all of their savings, their emergency fund, because we always tell people trade with money you can lose. But for a lot of people, they don't have that. So that source of money doesn't exist. So if that source of money doesn't exist, we have to be better at teaching people how to trade low risk, high probability trades, asymmetrical risk reward. And we have to be teaching people how to use all of the pieces of the Black-Scholes equation. Even if someone's not trading options, the options market is affecting the price of the underlying. Even if you don't trade futures, the futures market is affecting the price of your underlying. There is no such thing as being a siloed trader. Doesn't matter if you want to be a day trader and he wants to be a swing trader and she wants to be a crypto trader. All of those markets are integrated. It's a global society. I mean, now it's like you sneeze in Russia, rubles die, and suddenly the price of oil is like quadruple in the state of Connecticut. I mean, it's like you can't pretend that that these things are not all affecting each other. So we have to do better about continually making the knowledge accessible, but also always encouraging each other to keep learning. Because
Mhm.
a lot of the sales pitches of these courses is you're going to learn to do this strategy and you're going to get rich. If that existed anywhere, there would already have been those people teaching you would be billionaires. So anybody that's teaching you that 1 + 1 = quacking ducks, you need to be careful. It doesn't exist. So you have to continually be getting better, because here's the thing is that as you are getting better as an individual trader, everyone else is also getting better. You're not the only one training for a marathon. Thousands of people, thousands of retail investors are also educating themselves, preparing for an investment marathon. And you have institutions that are investing millions of dollars into the algorithms and into PhDs to come in and mix up their strategies. So if we are going to be competing in that field, we cannot degrade the field to make it look like this is elementary mathematics. No, it is not. It is calculus. It is that advanced level mathing, but you can get there if you just keep moving forward. But if you think you are going to be satisfied trading arithmetic level math and you're going to be able to make it in a calculus level course, it's not going to happen. Somebody told you otherwise, it was probably a lie. Maybe they didn't mean to lie to you. Maybe the marketing agent decided that it sounded more exciting, but I think it's entirely unfair. And when we have a community level crisis on our hands, that our buying power is minimizing very fast in comparison to other communities. We need to be extremely tender and cautious with how we treat other people's money, because it is unfair to pretend like it's so easy. You just do A and B and C and then you get this. That doesn't exist. And it's unfair that so many Black and brown people have lost huge amounts of money, tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars, completely unnecessarily if they had just been able to hedge their positions properly, they would have exposed themselves to maybe even 90% less of a risk.
I can't follow up with anything what you just said. So I mean, you hit everything on the nose. And if you guys listen to this and there's one thing that you picked up from this entire conversation, and it was one of the red flags I put in one of my videos, was that only this strategy works. It does not. It's like you said, you have to have strategies for various different markets and sentiments and etc. That's the only way you're able to successfully swim in the ocean. So yeah, thank you so much. I'm not going to follow up with that. You're amazing. Thank you so much. So once again,
thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And everybody on YouTube, see you guys in the next interview.
Still inside my head. Oh, this is